In this tutorial we're going to look at creating a lower half of the stand and the attachment that goes onto the base. So to do this, what we're going to do is look at this work face here. So on the side, the inside of the bar that you've already created, we'll create a new sketch and we'll look at it from the left hand side. So if we zoom out a little bit, we'll have the space to create this. Now I want this to be quite restricted, so we're going to draw it within this block. If we then deselect, so right click and escape the rectangle, we can move this lower line out of the way. So we know it's going to become lower, and that way it's going to mean that we have to add less dimensions. So we've managed to snap to these sides on all parts, okay? So dimension, the distance from this line to this line is going to be 25 millimeters. Okay, so we can see it's just overlapping at the top there. We're then going to make this line here 250 millimeters, and then we just need to put our holes in to match what's already there. So if we zoom in, we're drawing that one and we're giving it the diameter of 6, as with all of the holes on the stand, and whilst we're up here we're going to fillet these top parts. That's just going to save us, the fillet is 5 as well, so we don't want to change that. Saves us adding the fillets later on, so we're doing it during the sketch. Right, and I just want to check the dimension from the top to there is 10, which is exactly what I wanted. Okay, so zooming out and zooming back in towards the bottom here, we're going to draw it the same. So dimension 6 millimeters. There was nothing to snap to, so there's a few more dimensions needed. In the center, which is 7, and then we know it was 10 from the bottom. Using our fillet tool again, click, 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 so 3 in a row, and then press enter on your keyboard, 3 in a row, and enter on your keyboard, just making sure they are 5, and you can change them there if you want to later on. So that's now done. I'll finish that sketch, look at it in 3D and zoom in so I can check that my extrude is going to be in the correct position. Extrude, I want sketch 14 extruded, and we can see in there it's going way too far at the moment. We need to change that to 10, and that's the distance of that center part. It's a new extrude, so it's a new part. And click tick. You can see I've got an old sketch here as well. It looks like I don't need that, so I'm going to delete sketch 13. It's trying to look after my timeline. Apparently I did need sketch 13, so let's Control and Z on my keyboard and bring that back in. I'm not sure which one that's working to, so that's something for me to investigate later on. At the bottom now, so we've got that as a new part created. You can see our stand starting to come together. So before we move to create the bottom attachment, we're going to pattern the nut and bolt downwards. So just as good practice, I'm going to name them in this list. So we've got top bolt and part 7 top nut. We're going to create a linear pattern. It's for a part pattern, which is fine, top bolt and top nut, and the direction, any line going in the correct direction, which is here. If we look at it from the left, we can make sure this is lining up right. I'm going to click the arrow because I want it coming down, not going upwards, and I'm going to guess at the moment at around 200 millimeters. So you can see I've missed very slightly, so I reckon that could be around 190. A little bit of trial and error, and that looks like it's spot on. So I'll just check both sides, and it's going through absolutely fine. Tick. You see that you've got the pattern creating that just down here in part 9 and 10. We're not going to do that for the bottom because the bolt's going to be very slightly different. We've got to now create the attachment. So to do this, we're going to create a new work plane. We're going to do it about 20 mil above this circle. So it's not too big, but it's enough to play with. So click on work plane. We're then going to offset it from this face. That's our flat face. And we want to go upwards, so we're going to need to flip the arrow, and we're going to go 30 millimeters. Click tick. Our new sketch then is going onto that new work plane. We want to look at it from the bottom so it's a bit easier to look at, and we're going to just create two very basic rectangles. So first one on this side, making sure it's not snapping to anything, and then we can dimension them as well. So if we make this 30 millimeters, keeping my dimensions memorable, that 30 millimeters, and then we want to distance it from this edge, so we want them to be touching, so we're going to make that 0. I'm going to make this one 0, 2. The width of these is going to be 5, a nice strong stand, and then we're going to make sure that they line up this way as well, so the distance between them two should be 0. Okay, the only thing now to do is to make sure they're central on their distance from this bar. So we knew that the bar is 14 thick, so we're going to balance that distance out. So 14 off 30 is leaving us with 16, and we halve that to get 8. So that makes sure they're in the centre. We're going to finish that sketch there. So just two well-dimensioned rectangles. We're then going to extrude those as sketch 15, and you'll notice it's going to create two parts. When we click new, they're going to be different colours. It's going to be two parts, which isn't ideal, but I'll show you how to get round that a little bit later on. So that's not far enough at the moment. If we look at it from the right plane, we can see it's not even coming past the bottom. We want a little bit of clearance on there. So if we go 40 millimeters, you should see there's a little bit of clearance, and we can be happy with that extrude. We can come back to add the holes in at a later point. We're now going to create on the bottom face a new sketch for a circle, and look at it from the bottom as well so you know what it's going to look like. We're going to go from the center here, a big circle, and we're going to dimension that at 50 millimeters. Okay, and then let's go back to our isometric view and zoom in. Finished that extrude, and we're going to make that exactly the same, 5 millimeters. In fact, let's make that bottom a little bit chunkier. We're going to make it 10 millimeters, and we've got to tell it that it's sketch 16 that we want. We want it to add to one of these parts. It doesn't really matter which at this stage, and we'll click tick again. We now want it to know that all of this is one part, so we need to join part 12 and part 11 together. So we'll highlight both in the parts list, right click on them, and we're going to go to Boolean. Okay, that's going to join them. So we've got union, we've got subtract, intersect. You can use it for all sorts. In this one is a union because we're joining them together, and that will then create that as one part. We're not far off being done on this now. We just need to create our holes, and we're going to add some fillets as well to make it look a little bit more realistic and how we want. We're going to use these edges, and we're going to add a nice big fillet onto these that goes to create a half circle. So we know that needs to be 15 millimeters, and that's done. We're now going to make it look as if it's really strong, maybe even welded together with a tiny little fillet of 1 millimeter, and we're going to do that to the whole of this face. So you notice I clicked the face, not an edge, so every edge associated with that face was filleted. And the other two that we're going to do this face as well, and we're going to do this outside face here, and we can click tick. So we're happy with the way that's looking now. The last part to do, well, I say the last, there's two parts actually to do. We need a hole going through here and then a pin coming out that will attach to the base. So if we click on this face, we're going to create a new sketch on there, look at it from the right hand side and zoom in. And so that we can see what we're working on, we need to change it from shaded to hidden, edges visible. Nice and easy. So we know the hole needs to go there. Let's draw a circle and then dimension it so it's in the correct position. The circle needs to be 6 millimeters again. The distance from this edge is going to be, that's actually taken my dimension from the edge of the circle. So I could either make it 12 and live with the dimension being there, or redimension it from the center. So be careful that doesn't catch you out. In fact, I'm going to delete that and I'm going to put the dimension in again. So it's from the center of the circle to the edge, and that will be 15. Okay, you can see that it was the same. It's just confusing if you don't check that that is correct. So then from the center of this circle to the top of that base is going to be 20 millimeters. Okay, we know that's in the correct position now. We're going to tick, go back to our shaded view and make that more 3D so we can see that our hole is actually working. Extrude, click on the circle. We want it to go the other way and we want it to remove. And then the merge scope is with part 11. Just check both sides. We're going to change it. Instead of having a dimension, we're just going to say through all, so it knows that it's creating the hole in both parts and we know it's there. We'll come back to put the nut and bolt into that in the last tutorial. The next tutorial even, let's not put a limit on how many we might end up with. We're going to put now the pin to attach to the base. So click on the bottom of this attachment, view from the bottom, start a new sketch and draw a circle. We want it in the centre of this one. This is the world's easiest part. And we're going to make that a 12mm diameter circle, a nice robust pin that's not going to snap by accident. Turn it into a 3D shape. Extrude the pin and we're just going to make that 30mm. Click tick and that part is now finished. So there you go, a fairly complicated engineered component there. All that's left to do is put the nut and the bolt through to hold that stand in place, and you can see we're starting to really get there now with our lamp. Good luck.